So this is an actual three-legged table from the Renaissance, and il bagato is often a cobbler or a shoemaker in old Italian decks, which you can see here. That cup in his hand is arguably wine or possibly red wine vinegar, which was used in the shoemaking process. And you can see his pitcher there, maybe a pitcher of wine or a pitcher of red wine vinegar, but he has shoemaking tools there. Now, she didn't write any details about this particular table, and I didn't look it up. But I can picture a cobbler sitting at this end of the table with legs on either side of that third leg, being able more easily to work at this table. I don't know if that's the function of it being a three-legged table, but how cool is it that she found an example of a three-legged table for her Il Bagato card. Hi there, this is Ina from Taproot Tarot, and today I'd like to show you the Tarocchi Italiani by Valentina De Luca, whose company is Matronua. There's been quite a buzz about it. And one thing that I've noticed is that this is the first TDM style deck for a lot of folks. And I have seen a little bit of confusion as to the history of some of these cards, or the images that inspired Valentina. And I thought I would do a walkthrough with a few example decks to clarify, according to her, where she got her inspiration for these cards. It also gives me an opportunity to do a walkthrough of this gorgeous deck and just appreciate her hand-painted art with you. I did an unboxing of it and made a post that was photographs only because I received it on my lunch break one day and I couldn't wait to open it. So all I did was post some photos, and you can see those in my posts on YouTube or on Instagram. So if you'd like to see what the unboxing was like, go ahead and check that out. For those who are new to reading TDM or Tarot de Marseille decks, she also started a book on reading Marseille and has made the first couple of chapters of that book available to everybody. And that covers a little bit of history, her view of the cards, and then chapter 2 is on reading the pips, which is amazing. Her description of the suits is wonderful. And she starts getting into how we can go about thinking about pip cards. And I'll post the link to those. There's one in English and in Spanish, so you'll find that in my comment or in my description. There's also a little bit at the end about a divination game you can play that increases your intuition. And like I said, just some of her views on the cards. She also has a lot of information on her Kickstarter page about the history of this deck, how it came about, so I will link that as well. I also highly recommend following her on Instagram. Some of the information I'll let you know about may have been from posts that I saw on her Instagram page, and I've really enjoyed following this project from almost the beginning, and as soon as the Kickstarter opened up, I was right there, especially because there's a special edition card that I really wanted because it's one of my favorite cards. So the example decks that I'll show you today are the Soprafino, or the Classic Tarot by Lo Scarabeo, and the Jean Noblet Tarot right here. This is an example of a Type 1 TDM or Tarot de Marseille, as well as the Jacques Vieilleville Tarot by Viewmond. And that's right here. And this was the major inspiration for many of the alternate cards. I also have as a backup this gorgeous Convert deck, which is an example of a Type 2 Tarot de Marseille, in case we need to reference that. So let's get started. First, I wanted to mention that the blue on this box and that she uses throughout the deck is called sugar paper blue, and it's a traditional Italian color that she remembers from her childhood, used for paper that wrapped up loose goods like flour and sugar. And so she has all sorts of very personal touches and very specific details that really remind you of a time gone by, even if you don't have her Italian ancestry, but especially for her, I think. This deck is Eurocentric, and it's also a very personal project for her, so I'm not going to fault her for that. A lot of the models are actually friends and family of hers. And the history that she lays out on her Kickstarter campaign, and which she has talked about throughout on her social media posts, is really touching. So this is the first card that she painted for the deck, which inspired her to continue and basically focus on her art rather than other forms of employment. She does have a degree in painting and engraving, which is so relevant. But these are done in watercolor, and they are structured after the Tarot de Marseille or the TDM. So for a little bit of history, the TDM probably formed in France, but was inspired by earlier Italian Tarocchi decks. Most likely it crossed the border via soldiers. They were one of the biggest populations who played card games at the time. So eventually Tarocchi or Tarot became popular in France, and a few different styles came about, one of them being Jacques Villeville's style, which was printed right about the same time as the Jean Noblet. And you can even see that they have the same backs. So these are from about the mid-1600s. Now, because Marseille was a port town with a lot of printing presses, the style that was developed there became standardized. And that's the one we have here, the Type 1. And this is the number of triumphs and the order of cards that went on to influence most of the cards that we have today, most of the tarot decks. And that is the deck that primarily inspires Valentina De Luca's set of cards. At some point, the Tarot de Marseille made it back to Italy and was refined into more detailed engravings, which were actually started by a German card maker named Gumpenberg. And the engraver Della Rocco created this beautiful Italian version of the Tarot de Marseille. So it has the same number of triumphs and the order of triumphs that we find in the Tarot de Marseille, but with more refined engravings, which inspired this deck. So what we'll see here are TDM cards that are more detailed and realistic. And a lot of those I've noticed have been interpreted by some folks who are more familiar with the RWS as RWS cards. And I don't blame you at all, because I had the same reaction, but from the other way around. Until pretty recently, I didn't have much familiarity with the Smith-Waite deck. And some of the cards, I was really surprised to find out how similar they are to the TDM cards, such as Judgment, for example. So it's only natural to think some of these are inspired by RWS. I will say that she doesn't mention RWS at all in her writings. There are some possible esoteric influences, but let's keep in mind that there's a long history of continental esotericism, which were heavily borrowed from by the Golden Dawn and by Smith and Waite. So let's get started with our walkthrough. I will make note of the backs. They're reversible. And it's the god Janus, which she refers to as one of the first truly Italic gods, and who represents a doorway and has a lot of significance for this deck for her as a portal. And it also has an M for Matronua. I love this three-legged table. It's such a nice nod to the tradition of having one of the table legs off camera, as I like to call it, on the traditional battelleur or il bagatto, as it's labeled in Italian here. Bagatto just comes from a word that refers to a very small number, and it's only named that because it's the first triumph, whereas the Fool doesn't have a number and is the exception without any ranking in the deck. Now, interestingly though, this table, like most of the furniture, is based on a real picture that she found. So this is an actual three-legged table from the Renaissance. And il bagatto is often a cobbler or a shoemaker in old Italian decks, which you can see here. That cup in his hand is arguably wine or possibly red wine vinegar, which was used in the shoemaking process. And you can see his picture there. Maybe a pitcher of wine or a pitcher of red wine vinegar, but he has shoemaking tools there. Now, she didn't write any details about this particular table, and I didn't look it up, But I can picture a cobbler sitting at this end of the table with legs on either side of that third leg, being able more easily to work at this table. I don't know if that's the function of it being a three-legged table, but how cool is it that she found an example of a three-legged table for her Il Begato card. These cards are large. They are uncoated, and I know a lot of people want to be very careful with them. I have riffle shuffled these with all of the extra cards included, so it is possible. And she insists that they're very strong, very durable cards, and I wanted to see if I could soften them up. So far I haven't softened them up much. The corners are square, but they're so large that I haven't found those to get in the way at all. And I got these a little out of order, so here we have La Papesa. And the Empress is a portrait of her niece. I don't know why, but this is one of my all-time favorite emperors. There's something about the way he's dressed that spans multiple time periods, I think because of his sandals. They look like Roman sandals. The helmet has a little bit of a Roman look to it. And just the way he's sitting is reminiscent of the traditional emperor, but so naturalistic. I just absolutely love it. And all of her outdoor landscapes are vast and dramatic. The Pope, and I just want to bring special attention to the Via Veil Pope. Look at his face. It's just gorgeous. You've probably seen the Artisan Via Veil on my channel before. You may have. It is my moon deck. But I'm really loving this Vieux Monde version of it. That's more of a facsimile. Here is our first card that has two different versions. So the TDM, or Tarot de Marseille version, is the Lover. And this card represents a choice. And you can see that reflected in all of my example cards here. Now, whereas this Lover card is a type 1 with a blindfolded Cupid or Amaretto, this Convert version is a type 2, which you can see is more similar to the Tarocchi Italiani or the Matronua deck. And the Via Veil, similarly, no blindfold. And more feathered wings of a Cupid. This one has feathered wings as well. Some type 1 decks will have more like spotted butterfly wings like an Amaretto, which are basically Venus's minions. Compare that to Love. So this is the Lover, not the Lovers, but the Lover, who has a choice to make, whereas Love represents devotion and is found in other Italian decks. The Minchiati, for example, shows a masculine figure kneeling before a feminine figure who's crowning him. And there are other traditional decks that show a couple and represent devotion or commitment. So two different takes on this card, both traditional. Of course, Italian decks were not traditionally labeled. These metaphors were more familiar in Italian culture when they were created. It was only when the TDM made it to France that labels became popular. So this is the Lover and Love. Choice and devotion. This Chariot card is amazing. Look at the movement. Represented by the dust and rocks being kicked up by the horses. She chose to make the figures smaller to create a wider landscape for this card. And compare that to both the Type 1, the Via Veal, and the Soprafino all have these scalloped border across the roof of the chariot. Whereas the Type 2 TDM has draped curtains. This might be one of my all-time favorite Justice cards. The expression on her face is so appropriate. Her draped clothing is gorgeous, and her bare feet. The throne really seems to exude stability. But these sharp lines are broken up by naturalistic elements. Just absolutely love this. Might be one of my favorite cards in the deck. Here is the Hermit with the traditional lantern. In the Soprafino, you'll see it's more of an oil lamp with the flame right on the edge there. And in the Via Veal, he may just be holding up his cloak. This also has an alternative time card, Il Tempo. In Petrarch's Triumphs, Father Time is depicted winged, driving a chariot pulled by a stag. And so you will sometimes see a card very much like this, but with a stag in the background, also including the hourglass, which Valentina has chosen to include here. And the depiction of time is common in more traditional Italian decks. Check out the watercolor work in this Wheel of Fortune. It's just amazing. There is a joke in some decks where all three figures are either donkeys or they have asses' ears, and they have different sayings such as "I will reign," "I reign," "I did reign," or something like that. And then the bottom one says something more despondent, but reign is a play on words, of course, with the donkey. I will note that I have ordered the Via Veal in TDM order. It does have its own order, and La Pendue is also often pictured right side up or upside down, depending on how you want to look at it. That could be due to printing error or intentional, but I just kept these in the same order just to keep it consistent. Everyone I've seen do videos of this comments on how amazing the Death card is. I find it so moody. Her ability to paint water just blows me away. Oh my gosh. This is one that I've seen people assume is an RWS devil, and it looks a lot like him. But like all the other cards, I believe it's just a more realistic version of the TDM devil. Much like the RWS devil. You might notice on the Type 2 Convert TDM, there's no face on the belly. But there is a face on the belly of the Type 1 Noble. This is traditional medieval iconography. A face on the lower part of the body of the devil represents letting your lower appetites rule your mind. In other words, you're thinking with your stomach or other parts of your body. Here in the Soprafina, we have a different interpretation of the devil, which I love. But here with the Via Veil, we have the alternative devil depiction. And Valentina De Luca stated that this is her favorite devil. The Vandenbora has a similar devil, and they have slightly different meanings, which she goes into in her writing. By the way, her writing is fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. Like I said, I'll link her Kickstarter page where you can read this information. But she considers this devil to be more, fearing the monstrous that walks the earth, and this one being more about the temptations that bind us, but also taking a positive spin on it, giving ourselves an earthly treat sometimes. Which to me, the devil is very earth-based before we launch into the lightning or tower and then the celestial cards. These shoes are from folk tradition in the Italian province where her grandparents are from. So these are the two devil card options. This one I think is interesting too, that you could see him as wearing a mask, or perhaps even those horns are a hat. Here is a gorgeous tower card. You can see here lightning depicted as a celestial body in the TDM deck. Basically any light that came out of the sky was depicted pretty similarly in the Middle Ages and Renaissance art. So traditional TDM tower here, but then the Via Veil lightning card here. La Saeta is lightning bolt. And this is one of my favorite cards. I actually talked about this in my very first video that I posted on YouTube. And it represents a shepherd having a moment, especially seen here in the Via Veil, where his flock is beneath the tree. And the lightning depicted up there, again, as a celestial body. And when a tree is struck by lightning, its current can actually travel through the roots and electrocute anyone standing above those roots. So taking a shelter under a tree is very dangerous in a lightning storm. And a shepherd can lose their entire herd of animals. So definitely a tower moment. Here, at least they're running away. Here it looks more like he's watching helplessly. Poor goats or sheep. They look like goats to me. So this was a limited edition card that had 100 copies. So I feel very fortunate to have gotten it. So these are the two options for the Lightning or Tower card. Absolutely gorgeous star card. You can really see some influence there. And the bird is still pictured, but in a more realistic oak tree. And in the Via Veal, our star is an astronomer. A moon card, which here is full, unlike the TDM Type 2, which is shown in profile. Although I suppose you could say this is kind of a happy medium between the two. Here's our TDM Type 1, shown fully facing the audience, if you will. So yeah, maybe this is a little bit of a blend between Type 1 and Type 2. I absolutely love this depiction of the crustacean in the depths. Just gorgeous. The Soprafino has never been my favorite moon card with the poor lobster on a plate. And in the Via Veal, we have a spinner as the moon card, which is a big reason that I use the artisan version of this for my new moon deck. I see the spinner as creating something out of very little, or building up to something. And so the spinner is the alternate moon card in the Matronua deck. And she created a separate piece of art for the box to represent another depiction of the moon. Here's an adorable, traditional TDM sun card, which is a bit of a blend between the old TDM and the Soprafino. But you can see here the Via Veal has the image that inspired Pamela Smith in her depiction of the sun card. And I believe that's the inspiration for this gift that Valentina made for us, which is a print of an alternative sun card. So happy, a sweet pony. I like how her son is a lot more friendly than the Via Veal. Hello, it's the next day because I hit a wrong button on my camera and wrecked the second half of my video, so this might look a little different to you, but we're moving on to the Judgment card. And you can see how it's a more realistic version of the Marseille Judgment. Really beautiful world card with some extra decorative touches. It has a very Renaissance cathedral feel to it. And Valentina did say that she used herself as a model too. And she hasn't said this, but that does look a little like her, so I'm not sure if that's a self-portrait, but it might be, which I think would be really cool. And moving on into the pips and quartz. The stained glass touch with the Ace of Cups is amazing. And the water spouts are like a cathedral as well, which is just such a cool detail. On her Instagram page, I remember she posted early on an image of a really ornate fish fountain, where I believe she got the inspiration for the Two of Cups. And these are various animals. This is maybe a serpent or dragon. Soprafino has some lions. And these are possibly dolphins or fish. I love the choice of goldfish here. The pips do seem to repeat rather than being variable, but it doesn't take away from the imagery one single bit. And the details of the plants that she includes are just gorgeous. I believe I've mentioned, I know a lot of folks are buying this as their first pip deck, and she has encouraged us to share the first couple chapters of her PDF on reading the Marseille. So I will include those in the description box. It's in English and Spanish, and it's so good. She did write that she chose a different color palette for each suit, representing the seasons. However, she doesn't specify which season is which in her mind, leaving it open to interpretation in our minds, because different people have different associations with the suits. And I think there's enough variability that you could definitely interpret it in your own way, regardless. Such a sweet Valley of Cups, or Fanti in Italian. Just love the flower crown. And the movement of the path in the background, it's all so lovely. You've probably already noticed, but it's especially apparent in the quartz that her horses are gorgeous. Look at that detail. This is based on an image of her paternal grandmother, who passed away before she was born. And she talks about seeing images of her and wondering about her, but her dad not really wanting to talk about her, so this was a nice way to recognize her. Absolutely love her as the Queen of Cups. This guy is great. He just looks like a regular guy. All of her people look like real people, and I love that. The shoe details are interesting. Gosh, look at that rug though. Can you even believe that this is watercolor? Wow. The uncarved ends of the batons are amazing. She recognizes that a lot of folks use the foliage and arabesques and other decorations around the pips in their readings. And she wanted to make sure that those people could also make use of this deck. So she stayed true to form, even while adding her own details. As a side note, you might notice that the Via Veal didn't have any labels, only numbers on the triumphs, and doesn't have any numbering or labeling at all on the pips. And it's so funny, I'll point it out when I see it. A couple of the pip cards just have all of the titles squished onto one or two cards. It's pretty amusing. Look at this. You can see on this Noblet where she got the inspiration for these unusual flowers. These are the only flowers like this in her deck, I think. The detail of this one being fully bloomed, and this one either opening or closing. It's amazing. The details of the weaving between these batons, also amazing. You'll notice a lot of them are reversed, just facing the other direction in the Via Veal. And that's just how it rolls. That's just kind of the vibe of the Via Veal. The Knight of Batons is usually my favorite knight, largely because of this gorgeous Fleur Noir deck. I love the colors, his little bangs. But the Knight of Batons usually has a lovely blanket on the horse. And she has kept that here, which I really appreciate. You can see more of the Balinese influence on the Via Veal with the feathered headdress on the horse. This is Valentina De Luca's mother, who passed away when she was very young. And I think she is just such a sweet Queen of Batons. And you know me, I love a grumpy badass Queen of Batons, and this Noblet one is probably about my favorite. But I also kind of see the batons in the traditional Marseille sense as, you know, kind of the working class suit. I see them as very practical, hardworking, matter of fact. But they're represented in the Vacchetta. The queen is a shepherdess, which is another aspect of work. Farm folks also need to be nurturing toward their animals and plants. And I don't know that it's a coincidence that she's holding a shepherd's crook, a stylized one, instead of the usual club or staff for a baton. I'm not sure if this is meant to be a reference to the Vacchetta, Queen of Batons, but I like to think it is. So this is actually another one of my favorite Queen of Batons. Kind of the sweet nurturing aspect of the card. Now this shepherd's crook reminds you of the Pope staff that we find in the Noble and in the Vieilleville. So it's, you know, more of a symbolic, decorative shepherd's crook. And that was the nice thing about redoing this, because I was prepared with a stack of popes. So compared to Valentina's Pope with the traditional TDM Type 2 staff, whereas this is the TDM Type 1 shepherd's crook, which we also see on the Vieilleville. So if this is a reference to the shepherdess in the Vacchetta, I think that's a very fitting tribute and memorial for her mom. It's just so sweet. Gorgeous Ace of Coins. All of her aces. Just beautiful. Oh, and here is one of the ones I was mentioning in the Vieilleville, where all of the titles are just squished on. There's Le Soleil, the sun, with the backward S. Papes, you can see there. Le Monde. A bunch of them are in there. Which I think supports the idea that a lot of the variations in order and numbering in the Vieilleville is more likely to be a printing error than intentional. And then probably something that was just adopted as part of the pattern. That's kind of what happens with old tarot decks. Matronua 2024 through 25. In the woodblock printing process, the outline of the image is stamped separately from the letters and words usually. So it's almost like they, in the Vieilleville, they just forgot them and put them all, they were like, I don't know where these go. And just chose a card to put them all onto. And then of course the coloration would be the next step in the process. So it's pretty involved. And for folks who are probably mostly or completely illiterate, it was pretty easy to get things switched around. Four of Coins with the beautiful Matronua logo. When her husband's also an artist, and when she described the idea for her company, he sketched out the initial logo on a napkin. And she shows that in her Kickstarter link. These look like nightshade flowers, like datura or something. Got some neighbor kiddos playing outside. Oh, I forgot to point out, oftentimes the valet of coins will have one of the coins on the ground. And in this one, she's incorporated that into the earth, which really looks a lot like how it appears on the Via Vial. Such a cool detail. You have to get really creative, I suppose, to incorporate these unrealistic qualities into a more realistic art style. She talks about how the furniture she chose was based on real pieces of furniture from the Renaissance period, and she shares some of those photographs she found online on the Kickstarter page. Okay, this next card, it's just a pip card, but it is so beautiful. The first time I looked at it, I actually gasped. I don't know what makes it so stunning, but here we go. Look at this. What is it? It's the colors? I don't know. This central flower is so striking, and I think I was surprised by the depth that was expressed with the palette and the swords. The little rosebuds are darling as well. And you can see these scimitars are being drawn from their scabbards. Oh wait, is that a scabbard? A hilt? No, that's the hilt. I don't even know anything about swords. I think these are scabbards. So the point is probably just inside of the scabbard. So you can kind of see what's going on a little better than in the traditional Marseille. And the central swords, she chooses different styles for each one, which is another nice touch. I heard somebody say these are hawthorn, or I'm sorry, laurels. I always thought the ones with the berries were hawthorn, but with this image, and once they said that, I can totally see that being laurels. Usually there are oak branches and then some kind of a berried branch. Looks like it might be an iris, maybe? I always see this as a coneflower, but I can see an iris too. Oh, these ones are going to be a little off because I dropped them last night. And I didn't reorder them, so not a big deal. Randomly, 3 of Swords next to the 6. I love this rapier as the central sword in the 7. Very cool. So I think I remembered to talk about everything that I went through on take 1 that I recorded last night. I hope so. But let me know if I missed anything, if you have questions, especially if you're new to historical decks. I tried to make this video with the folks just getting into historical decks due to the Matronua in mind, but sprinkling in some interesting tidbits for the historical deck enthusiast as well, I hope. So what did you think? Was this a useful comparison? And what do you think of this gorgeous deck? Oh my gosh. If you haven't already, I highly recommend following Matronua and Valentina De Luca. I have a feeling that she'll continue to produce some gorgeous art. And I'm so happy for her that she can pursue her chosen path. If I didn't mention it before, she has a degree in painting and engraving. These swords are unique, aren't they? She must have found those from some historical source, huh? I'm a little off on my swords here. I was marveling as I filmed this yesterday at how I kept everything straight the whole time. All the decks matched up perfectly, or all the cards, I should say. But not in take 2. Oh well, that's fine. Desiree made a walkthrough of her deck, and it was so funny. She mentioned how young this Valet of Swords is, and said something like, we shouldn't be trusting teenagers with these sharp objects. It really cracked me up. This is one of the most dramatic examples of the art overlapping into the border. She said she used her intuitive guidance to decide where to make that happen. Well, goodness, just stunning. And this was the Tarocchi Italiani by Matronua, the artist Valentina De Luca, with some guest appearances. I had the Vachetta, Queen of Batons, the Viewmond Jacques Vieuville was this deck over here, the Fleur Noire Jean Noblet, which is a Type 1 TDM, a couple of references to this Type 2 TDM by Cartamundi, and the Soprafino Classic Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. Tell me your thoughts. Do you have this deck? Are you interested in historical decks after seeing it, if you weren't already? If you have this deck, did you get into TDM because of it? I've seen several creators for whom that was the case, and I just think that's so great. And tell me what you thought of this comparison. I hope it was helpful to kind of create some context for this deck. And again, thank you so very much for your time. I sure appreciate your presence. And I will talk to you next time.